cult of Hasanabi. City nurses are entering a second day of strikes over pay and staffing. That's right. Okay. Let's take a look at what's going on.
Back with day 2 of the nurse strike in New York City, thousands of nurses walked out of 2 major hospitals saying low pay, long hours, and minimal staffing are causing many of them to feel burned out.
Many say patient care is also at risk because of the
I gotta warm
conditions
up
they're
my
forced
food
to
real
work
quick. I'll be
in.
back.
NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard joins us now from outside Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City with the very latest on all this. Von, good morning to you. So we're now in day 2 of the strike. Remind us, why are these two sides at an impasse, and what are you hearing from nurses right there on the front lines of this strike?
Yeah, good morning, guys. We're now at 24 hours in which this impasse is taking place. Negotiations continue not only here at this Upper East Side of Manhattan hospital, but also as well as a hospital in the Bronx. We're talking about nearly 7,000 nurses who are now on strike here. Resources have had to been shifted to these facilities from public and private agencies as they try to make up for the absence of these nurses inside of these hospitals. But I want to let you hear from Amanda Smith. She is one of those nurses here who I met yesterday evening who is on the front lines of this picket. Take a listen to part of our conversation.
We're here for our patients. You know, they say safe staffing saves lives, and the nurses working at Mount Sinai are working under bad patient to staff ratios, so we're here for better staffing conditions.
In just about an hour ago, the Nurses Association here in New York City tweeted, "Can't stop, won't stop until we get a fair contract." The nurses who we've had conversations with over the last 24 hours insist this is more than compensation, but this is about the staffing shortages inside. And you heard Amanda note there that the ratio of patients to nurses is too high and that they need backup. Guys?
So, Vaughn, with over 7,000 nurses on strike and both hospitals full of patients without care, how is the State Department of Health handling the lack of nurses inside these hospitals?
Right. That's what the New York City Mayor Eric Adams said yesterday, that they were making sure that these hospitals were addressing the staffing shortages, turning to public and private agencies to bring in, for instance, traveling nurses here. But also they have canceled elective surgeries at these 2 facilities. They have also directed ambulances away from these 2 medical centers. You know, we heard from a new mother yesterday with the child who's in PICU.
Bro, they're literally trying to fucking I mean, we've talked about this a lot before on this broadcast. Like, what hospitals do in this situation to fucking find scabs is hire traveling nurses that they'll pay $8,000, upwards of like $8,000, like literally just so much more than they normally would fucking pay their own goddamn staff, that the math equation literally does not line up. Like, they're paying more for the scabs than they would if they just actually improved the conditions of the workers, or hired more fucking workers for the same, like for the regular price point.
And they had to actually take the mother and the child to a different hospital facility. But I want to let you just look at a part of a statement here from the New York Department of Health here, in which they say, quote, "The department has deployed surveyors to the affected hospital."
Intelligent. I love whenever these happen. I get recruiters offering me week-long contracts with $10K in the state where the strike happens. Travel nurses isn't always scabbing, but it's clear when it is. Do not take these jobs if you're a registered nurse. Yeah, exactly. It's bananas. Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, it does make sense when you think about it from the perspective of, like, they would rather teach a lesson, and in the long run, they can bully the fucking workforce into submission with traveling nurses that are scabbing so that they can turn back to business as usual, okay? I work at a hospital, and that's the exact reason when we won our last time contract, we won our last contract, scabs cost 4x our pay, yeah. This is done in pretty much every fucking industry, obviously. It's not unique to just, like, nursing, but it's crazy. And it's being done in your faces. If you're a nurse and you see this and you get frustrated, understand that they're doing it deliberately, because, like, they're saying, like, I mean, they want to punish you. They don't want you to fucking strike. They don't want you to have better conditions in your workplace. And ironically, of course, those conditions are conditions that actually make it worse for the patients overall too. When you don't have enough staff for your current patient number, you're not going to be able to provide adequate care for the number of patients. Travel nurses, of course, don't get the many benefits that you would have if you're a full-time staff, which is also, that's the reason why they use travel nurses. Because in a long enough timeline, that those benefits that you have to pay out are considered to be costly.
To ensure adequate healthcare resources are maintained to meet the needs of the community, to review and enforce required minimum staffing levels here. The attention here from not only the city, but there's also attention from the state here in the heart of New York City.
Yeah, let's talk about the state. We know Governor Hochul called on the nurses to go to arbitration. How did the Nurses Association respond to that request from the governor?
Right. The night before this strike went into effect, Joe, it was Governor Kathy Hochul who called on the two sides to meet in binding arbitration, essentially having these two sides work out a deal with an arbiter. But ultimately, it was the Nurses Association that declined that offer, and you heard from the hospitals that pushed back against the Nurses Association, saying that they've left not only a good deal, a good fair contract on the table, but now are also declining this binding arbitration that the governor put forward here. That is really leaving to questions as to what the Nurses Association wants here from the hospital. The Mount Sinai Hospital here yesterday put out a statement saying that the deal that the Nurses Association has in front of them is a good one, and that they are the ones that are leaving their patients out in the cold and in need. These are tough negotiations that have real life impacts, but the nurses insist that they're doing it to ensure that there's better long-term care for those very patients.
All right,
guys.
Von Hilliard here in New York.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
How do you look a fucking... Wait, what?
Andrew Tate.
Oh, this is crazy. I want to watch this.
Andrew Tate has had a very eventful...
We're back with day 2 of the nurse strike in New York City.
But I mean, this is absolutely slanted against the nurses. Like, how do you find yourself looking at an entire sector that specifically works to keep people alive, okay, that do an insanely difficult job, that are simply demanding to hire more fucking nurses that the hospitals should hire so that they can provide better care, and you still end up cutting this kind of coverage that like doesn't uniformly agree with the nurses, okay? It just doesn't that trigger some sort of filter in your brain as like a human being when you see something like that, when you're like, well, this seems fucking weird. Like, how are you gonna be like, oh, these fucking lazy ass nurses, bro? Like,
in New York City! In New York City!
When we talk to nurses that work here for about 30, 40 years, they're saying there's never been a strike.
And take a stand.
Here they said they've always come close, but it never happened. So for it to happen at a New York hospital is pretty monumental.
The most important reason why we're here is because of chronic understaffing that has gone on for years, that has left nurses burnt out, patients in unsafe conditions.
Staffing is like the glaring issue here. We had as many as 800 vacancies a few months ago. It's down to 550, I understand.
The hospital could be hiring more people. That is what it is. They are saving a lot of money right now by having 500 open vacancies. This has a lot to do with the pandemic. I think it was bad before the pandemic, and it's gotten much worse.
We are essential. We are not essential. We are essential.
It's an extremely difficult decision. We weren't, in that room until 1 o'clock in the morning doing.
yeah, I think what we need to do is make sure that we have more cops, I think. No, I will not elaborate. No, I will not say anything further. I just think there's a real understaffing in the police force instead. And that's where government funds should go towards. And we should never, this is why we don't deserve, and hopefully we'll never get socialized medicine.
Negotiations in September for no reason. This is not a decision that we wanted to make, but we made it because we feel that this is the only thing that we can do at this point.
It's a big conflict. It really is, because you're leaving your patients and you develop relationships with them. You get to know them. You get to know their families.
So this is another sector that is like where a lot of women work. So I expect all of those like weird leftist accounts that are just simply reactionaries to be like, nursing isn't real labor, actually. You know, just like working at Starbucks or working in the service sector is not real labor. I can't wait for the fucking idiots to be like, gay people and women and even, dare I say, trans people are nurses. So clearly not a real job. Anyway.
You have other coworkers that's not nurses that you're thinking about too, that's on the floor. But at the same time, if we're burning ourselves out, that's the thing. Like, something has to stop.
Kendall Brody says, as a critical care nurse, I can say I don't want more money. I want my patients to be safe. I want my patients to be able to receive adequate basic care. What the fuck? Fossabot clapped our critical care nurse here in the chat. I can say I don't want more money. I want my patient to be safe. I want my patients to be able to receive adequate basic care. It's becoming so unsafe, so scary. It's not even a nursing shortage either, because when we are staffed, they say the census. And then they call off nurses. There's no shortage of nurses. There's a shortage of people that remember that these are human lives. We only care about the money. It's disgusting. Damn, Fossabot is just clapping Kendall Brody right now. Fascist bot. It was so important. Sorry, guys. Yeah, no, this is... I mean, staffing is like one of the most common things that nurses complain about. And partially because the sector is also like occupied by large swaths of... a large percentage of the sector is occupied by women, so it's like teaching, nursing, and any kind of like caregiving position. Like industries that have like a higher percentage of women than other industries literally routinely get fucking axed, and the consideration for them is like social work is another one. They literally just are like, yeah, no, it's just women and immigrants. Like, who gives a fuck? Fuck them. And it's pretty much the same all around too, like across the board. Meanwhile, these are insanely difficult jobs, like unimaginably difficult jobs. Are you just saying women like to complain? Okay, shut up, Big Seth. It's not time for jokes. Come on. Do you think it's a nice try FBI moment, or Chad is just straight brainwash calling unionization and strikes greedy? No, that's not nice try FBI. That's like the most common fucking, that's the most common point of anti-union propaganda. They're just repeating what their dads have told them. It's one of the easiest ways to like immediately try to cause a rift within the working class when there's any sort of like labor action happening, is by saying, oh, the people that are stopping work are lazy and they're greedy, and that's why they're stopping work, not because they have legitimate complaints. Another common one, as I talk about all the time, is the claim that that only the workers can stop the labor, the labor haltage, okay? The labor stoppage. It's not. It's up to the management. It's up to the managerial staff to actually fucking end a strike. They can do it. They can end the strike by meeting the demands of the workforce, but they don't want to do that, and the media rarely ever covers it that way, and that is what's fucked up. That's why I always say the media is absolutely on the side of capital, okay? If you hear people talk about a strike, mention the demands of the workforce that are always reasonable, okay, that then exclusively surround the conversation about like what the workers are doing and why they won't stop fucking working, why they won't start working again, understand that if they're placing the emphasis and the blame of the strike on the labor force, they are not on the side of the labor force. They are on the side of capital.
Vicious cycle.
We need to be able to work safely with our patients, and that is not something that Mount Sinai is willing to negotiate with us right now. What I would say is that it is reckless to understaff a hospital, leading to unsafe conditions for our patients. We don't want to have to walk out, but we're here because we have been sounding this alarm for years and nothing is being done.
Oh, this is a big deal too. We're going to talk about this as well. This pairs nicely with the conversation that we're having. Glacier Northwest v. Teamsters is the latest SCOTUS case that's flying under the radar, but you need to know about it. If a wealthy corporation gets their way, companies would be able to sue striking workers for the cost of lost revenue, spoiled products, and more. Be warned.
Lost revenue from customers.
That is fucking insane, dude. Okay? That is an insane additional extra burden to add on top of labor unions. First, they shut off, with Janus and numerous other decisions, they shut off the funding pool, okay? Now they're going after striking, the one tool that the workforce has, okay? The one tool that the workforce has still in this like sea of lack of adequate care is being able to strike, to stop the work. The fact that the Supreme Court could just decide on this against the labor force is I wouldn't say unimaginable. It's expected. Most of the fucking nurses, teachers, people working in like important parts of the infrastructure, like the railroads, as a matter of fact, usually have like no strike clauses built into their goddamn contracts, because they have to keep the government going. So let's see what happens in this one.
Imagine you're a newly unionized Starbucks barista discussing whether to strike. You've got lots to think about, but what you probably wouldn't expect to have to consider is whether your union-busting boss, Howard Schultz, is going to sue you for the impact of your strike on Starbucks, for the coffee that gets wasted or milk that goes sour or lost revenue from customers who get tired of waiting in line. But if a Seattle concrete mixing company and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce get their way before the Supreme Court this year, that's the crazy position that American unions are going to be in if they want to strike. And it could be devastating for workers everywhere. The case the Supreme Court is considering is called Glacier Northwest versus International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local Union 174. And here are the facts. After months of contract negotiations, cement mixers at Glacier Northwest decided to go on strike. They drove their trucks back to the company's headquarters and walked off the job. Workers left trucks that had already been loaded with cement running so that the cement wouldn't instantly harden inside the truck's drums. The strike lasted 1 week before the companies reached agreement on a new contract. The issue in this case revolves around what happened next. The employer sued the Teamsters for tortious destruction of the company's property. Glacier asked a Washington state court to make the Teamsters pay for damage to their trucks as a result of cement hardening after the strike began. The Washington State Supreme Court threw out the case, finding that it wasn't appropriate to apply state law to a labor dispute covered by a federal law, the National Labor Relations Act. The state Supreme Court's decision rested on long-standing U.S. Supreme Court precedent that the National Labor Relations Board decides whether union conduct is protected by federal law or not. This should have been the end of the story. Unfortunately, it wasn't. As we've seen with the supercharged conservative majority currently sitting on the Supreme Court, no precedent is safe. To date, the Supreme Court has recognized the importance of the right to strike and allowed state law to sanction strike activity only when a union's behavior is so egregious that striking workers have lost the protection of the federal law. Think violence on the picket line or obvious vandalism at the employer's place of business.
Of course, endless amounts of violence that workers need to withstand on the picket line is completely appropriate, because that violence is conducted in the hands of the police force, which of course has a monopoly of violence. It's the state's violent actors doing such things. So they can withstand that. That's totally legal and totally cool. But God forbid, the moment that you fucking break something, okay? Oh no. That would be unacceptable.
But in this case, there are no allegations of violence, and the drivers even tried to mitigate harm to the trucks by leaving them running. Bottom line, it shouldn't be the union's job to make it as easy as possible for an employer to weather a strike. The whole point of a strike is to create an economic incentive for an employer to bargain.
Yeah. This literally undermines the concept of a work stoppage. Okay? The entire point of a work stoppage is to make the bosses understand what happens when workers don't come into fucking work. So that's the point. You can't literally turn around and be like, yeah, now you have to bear the cost. That's insane. Now, of course, the Supreme Court can do whatever the fuck it wants, and we'll see.
Seriously with the union. But even if this was a close case on the facts, which it isn't, the Supreme Court still had no business hearing it. It's the job of the NLRB to decide if strike behavior is egregious or not. So why is the Supreme Court getting involved to open the door for companies to sue unions that strike? Because this court has shown a sustained hostility to workers' collective bargaining rights. Just a few years ago, it reversed decades of precedent to make it harder for public sector unions to collect dues. And 2 years ago, it made it impossible for unions.
This is the decision I was talking about. The Supreme Court ruled against public unions collecting fees from non-members in 2018. Okay? Like, this is the decision I was talking about. This decision greatly undermined the last, bastion of unions in the public sector. And the way that they can fund themselves. Because the existence of unions alone increase the benefits and the average salaries that people in that sector get, even by existing. Before we talk about collective bargaining agreements and contracts that span over entire industries, we don't actually have that here in America in the same way that we do in France, for example. France has a 98% collective bargaining agreement that encompasses 98% of the entire labor force, even though only a much smaller percentage of the workforce is actually unionized directly, right? We don't have that in America. America is a 11% unionization rate, and the collective bargaining contracts, they do not go across the board on entire sectors. But for that reason alone, it is understandable that you should be able to, as public unions, collect fees from non-members. But, everywhere around the world, you see governments that even have labor parties like the UK or Australia increasing their hostility. Increasing their hostility towards any kind of labor action. Why are they doing that? Well, the profit rate has a tendency to decline. So the more profit rates fall, the more profit margins fall, the more you have to work on whichever part you can actually massage, whichever part you can actually squeeze, and that is the workforce. The workforce is more productive than ever before as a consequence of technological advances. So now you can get one guy to do the job of three, right? So instead of cutting the guys' work hours by 3 and keeping the same level of employees, allowing that person to have great amounts of freedom in his personal life, you fire the other two and make the one guy do the job of three. This is how it works. And this is how, while productivity has skyrocketed, wages have remained stagnant.
Unions to collect dues. And 2 years ago, it made it impossible for union organizers to talk to farm workers in the fields of California. And now conservatives are plotting to make it easier for wealthy corporate bosses to be able to sue union employees just for asserting their constitutional right to strike. At a time of historic levels of worker organizing and public support for unions, it is exactly the wrong time for the Supreme Court to make the right to strike harder than ever for workers to exercise. But for the Roberts Court, it seems to always be time to side with corporate employers' efforts to undermine workers' rights.
Yep. Rishi Sunak is also trying to set new laws that make striking for NHS workers harder. I mean, that makes sense too. They're hired by the government, and they're in the public sector, and also on top of that, they like literally are doing. Oh fuck! Ow! Ow! Oh no! I'm dripping. No, it's not my boogers, you fucking idiot. I'm dripping on the side of the fucking plate curry sauce because I dipped it into my bowl like I always do every day. And I wanted to make sure that I got it. No, I didn't actually sneeze into my hand. I mean, I sneezed into my hand, but nothing came out. It was a spice sneeze. Anyway, is it your first time eating Indian food? Yeah, dude. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this is weird. Is the working class just dead in America? How do we just recover rights? I mean, not necessarily dead, but any amount of like labor momentum will be squashed. Okay. I'm going to skip the Brazil mention and we're going to move on to the update, the Andrew Tate here, Andrew Tate's
ban from
comments
Twitter,
could be used
where he
against
went
him.
on to beef with Greta Thunberg about his car collection.